はじめまして、ジョナタン・フェリックスと言います。よろしくお願いします。2000年から2002年まで岐阜に住んでいました。岐阜農林高校で英語を教えていました。When I arrived, a colleague named Hiramitsu Sensei gave me the Book of Tea. It explains many of the subtle nuances of Japanese culture. One concept is Ichigo Ichie. Ichigo Ichie is a four-character idiom which invites us to live each moment more mindfully with a deeper appreciation for the brevity of a life, which is like the cherry blossoms before they fade. Ichigo Ichie is roughly translated as for this time only and is similar to the Western acronym YOLO, you only live once. I live in a small town called Kitagata in Gifu Prefecture. Gifu Castle sits on top of Mount Ginka, the highest point in the city. From there you can see the Nagara River, which is famous for cormorant fishing. I wanted to experience Japan more intimately, so I bought a folding kayak and paddled it all the way down to where the Nagara, Giso, and Ibi rivers converged. I also had the opportunity to paddle biwa at night. Biwa is the largest inland lake in Japan. I paddled by moonlight and was surprised to chance upon a floating temple in the middle of the lake. It was magical. I think it was Hoonji, but it was so dark and time has erased some memories, so I can't be sure. On another mini-adventure, I took the train down to Uno and did some island hopping until I came to Shodoshima. I found a ryokan. I remember sitting down for breakfast and pausing to hear the song of a Japanese wagtail. Its song reminded me of a haiku by a ryokan, who wrote, "A bush warbler and of 100 passers-by, not one knows it's there." I cycled most of Japan. The first ride was from Fukuoka back to Gifu. I stayed in a capsule hotel in Hiroshima, which was a first. The next day I cycled past Genbaku Dome. It was a profoundly moving experience. I was detained by police in one city and taken to the police station because I was cycling on a busy highway. They were very courteous and let me go when they realized that I was just a dumb foreigner on a bike who had lost his way. I cycled past Sekigahara, the site of a famous battle. The forces of Tokugawa Ieyasu defeated the armies of rival clans. He became shogun and unified Japan. On another trip, I cycled from Hokkaido to Gifu. In another first, I stayed at a love hotel by myself because I couldn't find any other place to rest. As I traveled, I noticed that even in the most rural towns, they had these eclectic buildings. I was told they were pachinko parlors. I stopped in and played for a few minutes, but I found it pretty boring. Still, it was another first. Before returning home, I walked the Shikoku Trail. The pilgrimage follows the footsteps of Kobodaishi, a priest who was said to have walked this route in 815 BC. The trail stretched for about 700 miles and wound its way around Shikoku. I stopped at the 88 temples that dotted the perimeter. I slept in forests, on park benches, and camped out along the Shimano River and Oki Beach. I slept at many a temple gate under the fierce gaze of the temple guardians. I even took shelter in a park restroom when a typhoon skirted the island. It didn't touch down, but it brought strong winds and heavy rains. I had one memorable encounter. One night it was raining. I was tired and decided to hitchhike to the next temple. A man and his friend picked me up. He took me to his house for dinner. He took off his shirt as it was hot and humid. He had a lot of tattoos. He told me he was a hitman for the Yakuza, the Japanese mafia, and said he had served 6 years in jail. I noticed the tip of his pinky finger had been amputated. I later learned that to atone for misdeeds, Yakuza would cut off the tips of their fingers and present them gift-wrapped to their oyabun, who were like bosses in the American mafia. I didn't stay long. That was an encounter that was thankfully brief, but one I will never forget. Some of my colleagues told me that I'd experienced more of Japan than most Japanese. The trip was a gift. It's been 20 years since my last visit, but like the lyrics of the popular 80s song, I feel like a part of me had turned Japanese. A month ago, I completed a mural for a makerspace. I drew my inspiration from Japanese manga art. I did another mural for a music room and included artists from all over the world, including Ayumi Hamasaki, who was very famous when I was there. I adopted many Japanese habits. Several times a week, I may have miso for breakfast, yakisoba for lunch, sushi for dinner, and natto for a snack. Going from heat to cold is another habit I picked up at the onsens in Japan. I do breath work every morning. Sometimes I use the shakuhachi, a bamboo wooden flute, which was used by Komuso monks to train the mind in a practice called suizen, or blowing zen. My colleague Hiramitsu Sensei took me to a Zen temple to meditate, and the habit stuck. Today I teach meditation. I often use the ox to represent the mind. The mind is strong like an ox. This comes from the Zen tradition to describe the 10 stages on the path toward awakening. The logo I use for my website is an ox. I laser cut and wood burn oxen on the Seizan meditation benches that I build. I also use the samurai to illustrate the technique of cutting mental elaborations when meditating. My 2 years in Japan were unforgettable. I'm very grateful to the Japanese people and the Ministry of Education for giving me such a precious gift. Ichigo Ichie, this life is precious and brief. For those fortunate enough to visit Japan, may your days be filled with adventure.